In the mountains of Calabria, where ancient codes of silence have governed life and death for centuries, one woman's desperate attempt to break free from the grip of organized crime would lead to a disappearance so calculated, so methodical in its brutality, that even hardened investigators would struggle to comprehend the depths of betrayal involved. The case of Lee Garofalo reveals not just the savage mechanics of Ndrangheta justice, but puzzling elements that suggest forces beyond mere criminal vengeance were at work in her final days. But first, subscribe to never miss our weekly deep dives into the unknown. It was November 9th, 2009, in the sprawling urban maze of Milan, northern Italy. The industrial city, home to nearly 1.4 million people, had become a refuge for those seeking to escape the suffocating traditions of the Italian South. Among them was Lee Garofalo, a 35-year-old woman whose delicate features and quiet demeanor masked an inner strength that would ultimately seal her fate. Official records from the Direzione Investigativa Antimafia paint a portrait of a woman trapped between two worlds. Born in Pagliarelle, a small frazione in the province of Cosenza, Lee had grown up in the shadow of the 'Ndrangheta, Calabria's most powerful criminal organization. Her relationship with Carlo Cosco, a member of the notorious Cosco Aralotta clan, had begun when she was barely 17 years old. The documented facts reveal a pattern of escalating violence that drove Lee from her homeland. Police reports detail numerous instances of domestic abuse, threats, and intimidation tactics designed to keep her compliant with the clan's expectations. Yet something had changed in Lee's mind during the early months of 2009. Investigators would later discover that she had begun secretly documenting the criminal activities she witnessed, filling notebooks with names, dates, and detailed accounts of Ndrangheta operations. What authorities found particularly disturbing was not just the content of these notebooks, but their organization. The entries followed no chronological order, yet when arranged according to a pattern that investigators are still reluctant to discuss publicly, they revealed connections between seemingly unrelated criminal enterprises across 3 different regions of Italy. On the morning of her disappearance, surveillance cameras captured Lee boarding a train from Milan Centrale Station, accompanied by her 14-year-old daughter Denise. The destination recorded on their tickets was Calabria, specifically the town of Cosenza. This journey defied all logic, as Lee had spent months in hiding from the very people she was now traveling to meet. The mystery deepens when examining the phone records from the days preceding her departure. Lee had received 17 calls from a number registered to a woman named Maria Concetta Cassiola, another Ndrangheta associate who would herself meet a violent end just 4 years later. The content of these conversations remains classified, but investigators noted that after each call, Lee's behavior became increasingly erratic. Her landlord in Milan later reported finding strange markings scratched into the wooden door frame of her apartment. The symbols bore no resemblance to any known gang tags or territorial markers. When photographed and analyzed by experts in organized crime iconography, the markings were deemed inconsistent with traditional Ndrangheta communication methods. The official investigation reveals that Lee arrived in Cosenza on the afternoon of November 24, 2009. Witness statements place her at a restaurant in the town center, where she met with several members of the Cosco clan. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses shows her entering the establishment with Denise, but only the girl was seen leaving approximately 2 hours later. What happened during those missing hours has been reconstructed through testimonies that emerged during subsequent trials. The accounts describe a woman who had finally decided to break the omerta, the code of silence that bound her to the criminal organization. Leah had apparently agreed to cooperate with authorities in exchange for protection, a decision that amounted to signing her own death warrant. The methodical nature of what followed reveals the calculated brutality for which the Ndrangheta has become infamous. According to court documents, Lee was transported to a house in the countryside outside Cosenza, where members of her own extended family participated in what can only be described as a ritualistic execution. The details preserved in judicial records speak of hours of torture designed not merely to kill, but to send a message to anyone else who might consider betraying the organization. Perhaps most chilling is the revelation that emerged during the trials of her killers. Vito Cosco, her former brother-in-law, testified that the decision to eliminate Lee had been made months earlier, and that her final journey to Calabria had been orchestrated through psychological manipulation rather than physical coercion. The phone calls from Maria Concetta Cacciola, investigators learned, had contained threats against Denise's life unless Lee returned to face family justice. The disposal of Lee's body reveals a level of planning that suggests involvement from individuals with specialized knowledge. Her remains were burned using industrial accelerants, then scattered across multiple locations in the Calabrian countryside. The forensic evidence indicates that the cremation process was carried out with precision, suggesting access to equipment and expertise beyond what typical criminal organizations possess. What investigators found most puzzling was the discovery of bone fragments in locations that had been searched multiple times by both police and independent search teams. These remains appeared seemingly overnight in areas that had been thoroughly combed just days before. Forensic anthropologists noted that the distribution pattern defied conventional understanding of how cremated remains disperse naturally. The trial that followed Lee's murder revealed connections that extend far beyond simple criminal enterprise. Testimony indicated that the Ndrangheta's influence had penetrated institutions, businesses, and social structures throughout Calabria and beyond. Yet certain aspects of the case were deemed too sensitive for public disclosure, with entire sections of court proceedings conducted behind closed doors. During the investigation, authorities uncovered evidence of a parallel network operating within the Ndrangheta structure. This shadow organization appeared to target specifically women who showed signs of potential defection, using psychological warfare techniques that bore striking similarities to methods employed by intelligence agencies. The sophistication of these operations suggested training and resources beyond what traditional organized crime families typically possess. One of the most disturbing discoveries came during the search of properties connected to the Cosco clan. Investigators found detailed profiles of dozens of women associated with Ndrangheta families, including psychological assessments, family histories, and vulnerability analyses. Lee's file was marked with symbols that matched those found scratched into her apartment door in Milan. The final revelation that shattered investigators' understanding of the case came from an unexpected source. During renovation of an abandoned building near Cosenza, workers discovered a hidden room containing hundreds of photographs spanning several decades. Among them were images of women who had disappeared over the years, each marked with the same mysterious symbols found in Lee's file. These photographs suggested a systematic program of elimination that had been operating for far longer than anyone had suspected. The women in the images shared certain characteristics beyond their connection to Ndrangheta families. Each had shown signs of independence, had children to protect, or had expressed doubts about the criminal lifestyle they had been born into. Analysis of the photographs revealed something that defied rational explanation. Several images appeared to have been taken after the women's reported deaths, showing them in locations that investigators could not identify despite extensive geographical analysis. The photographic paper and development techniques were consistent with the time periods when the women had disappeared, yet the subjects appeared unchanged by the passage of years. The case officially remains open, though active investigation ceased after the conviction of Lee's killers in 2013. Her daughter Denise, now under witness protection, has become a symbol of resistance against organized crime influence. Yet questions persist about the true scope of the network that orchestrated Lee's death and the fate of other women who dared to challenge the ancient codes that govern life in Calabria's shadow economy. What do you think really happened during those missing 2 hours before Lee Garofalo's disappearance, and how do you explain the mysterious photographs found years later? Subscribe to uncover more cases where the official story barely scratches the surface of a much darker truth.